Arrested again, a man who first made headlines as a child when he was shot and when he actually shot and killed someone at the age of 11 is facing new charges tonight.
I hadn't lived long enough to understand the time involved or what really suffering was. I did something horrible.
Some say even the worst kids deserve a second chance. But these crimes are so monstrous, freedom seems impossible.
As soon as TJ Lane walked in, he was executing his plan, taking off his button-down shirt to reveal this, a white t-shirt with the word scribbled on it.
They prey on the innocent, even children, and their actions reveal the darkest corners of human nature. In 2025, 5 young offenders remain behind bars, but one rises above the rest in sheer evil. Stay with us as we uncover who that is and why their story will haunt you long after the video ends. Curtis Jones. Cocoa Beach, Florida in the late 1990s seemed like an ordinary town, but inside one home, Curtis Jones and his sister Catherine grew up in terror. Behind closed doors, they suffered years of alleged abuse at the hands of a male relative. When they begged for protection, their father and his girlfriend, Sonia Spites, ignored their cries. For years, the torment continued ruthlessly, and the children learned quickly that no one was going to save them. By early 1999, 12-year-old Curtis and 13-year-old Catherine finally decided to put an end to their torment, and in their young minds, there was only one way to end the torment. On January 5, 1999, the siblings created a plan that would change their lives forever. That night, they found their father's 9mm semi-automatic handgun left unsecured in the house. Their goal was chillingly clear: to take the life of the relative who had abused them, their father who had failed them, and Sonia Spites, who they believed had turned her back on their suffering. Around 10:30 that night, 36-year-old Sonia was asleep in her bedroom when Curtis stepped inside with the gun trembling in his hands. He raised it and pulled the trigger 3 times. The first shot pierced her chest, the second tore through her abdomen, and the third struck her head.
Catherine Jones was only 13 and her brother Curtis 12 when they shot and killed Nicole Spites in 1999.
The quiet hum of a bedroom fan was replaced by the deafening cracks of gunfire. Neighbors heard it, but in those moments no one came. Sonia Spites passed away instantly, the headshot ending her life before she could even wake. As the reality of what they had done sank in, Curtis and Catherine dropped the gun on the floor and abandoned the rest of their plan. Their father and the abuser were still alive, but fear had taken away their will to continue.
Police, attorneys, and newspapers reported the children killed Spates because they were jealous of attention their father was giving to her.
They fled the house, leaving behind their belongings, and hid in a nearby park. Hours passed as they crouched in the shadows, unsure of what would happen next. But their escape was short. Around 12:30 in the midnight, a neighbor noticed them and called the police. Officers arrived quickly, arresting both children without resistance. In less than 2 hours, the story that had been buried in silence for years erupted into the headlines. The case shocked Florida. 2 children who had been abused and neglected for years now stood accused of murder. In juvenile court, their ages spared them from adult sentencing, but the crime was too severe to overlook. On March 15, 1999, Curtis and Catherine pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Psychiatric reports detailed the abuse they endured, but the judge still handed down heavy punishments. Curtis received 18 years in a maximum security juvenile facility in Okeechobee, while Catherine received 15. Prison became their new reality. Curtis went through mandatory counseling and schooling, learning how to survive behind walls designed to keep him contained.
The brother and sister, the youngest at the time to be charged as adults with murder in the country, pled out and were sentenced to 18 years in prison.
Catherine worked through programs that rewarded good behavior. She was released first on June 10, 2012 at age 26. Curtis walked free later on January 5, 2017, his 30th birthday. The same date 18 years earlier when he had pulled the trigger. For a while, it looked as if Curtis might finally start over, but his freedom unraveled. On November 18, 2020, he was caught in a sting operation in Cocoa Beach, accused of selling a controlled substance. The charges were severe: possession with intent to distribute and trafficking. On February 14, 2021, he was sentenced to 10 more years in the Florida state prison system. The cycle had come full circle. The boy, once seen as a victim of abuse, had grown into a man trapped again, this time not by family but by his own choices. His return to prison left many asking if the system had failed him. Had 18 years inside truly prepared him for life outside? Or had the trauma of his childhood left wounds that time behind bars could never heal? Now in 2025, Curtis is 38 years old, serving his sentence in Florida. If he completes his term, he may walk free again around 20 to 30. Curtis's actions were driven by years of abuse. But what happens when a child kills for no reason at all, taking lives as if it were a game? Craig Price. At just 13, Craig Price committed a crime that would shock his small community forever. On the night of July 27, 1987, in Warwick, Rhode Island, he broke into a home just 2 doors down from his own. Inside, he found a kitchen knife and used it to stab 27-year-old Rebecca Spencer 50 times, ending her life in a violent frenzy.
But detectives didn't buy it, noting he went into the house with a small knife. Price says Joan Heaton awoke and spotted Price in the kitchen.
2 years later, the violence returned. At 15, Price entered the home of his neighbors, the Heaton family, on September 1, 1999. High on marijuana and LSD, he attacked 39-year-old Joan Heaton, stabbing her 57 times. Her 10-year-old daughter, Jennifer, witnessed the brutal assault and tried to intervene, only to be stabbed 62 times herself. The youngest, 7-year-old Melissa, also watched in horror as Price crushed her skull and stabbed her 30 times.
They're chilling, never-before-heard recordings. Notorious serial killer Craig Price detailing to detectives how he murdered a family of 3 in his Warwick neighborhood.
The ferocity of the attacks shattered knife handles, leaving blades lodged inside the victims, including one stuck in Jennifer's neck. When questioned, Price confessed without remorse. He claimed that years of racism, which he said began in childhood when white adults allegedly hurled slurs and even tried to run him over, fueled his rage and desire for revenge. His explanation offered little comfort to anyone who heard it. Even in prison, Price's aggression did not diminish. Transferred from the adult correctional institutions in Cranston, Rhode Island to Florida in 2004 due to his violent behavior, he continued to clash with authorities and inmates. In March 2009, he was denied parole with a release date set for May 2020. Just months later, in July 2009, he attacked another inmate during a fight in a Florida prison using a homemade shiv to stab a correctional officer in the finger as guards intervened. This incident led to his transfer to a more secure facility. Violence followed him again in 2017 at Suwannee Correctional Institution, where he stabbed fellow inmate Joshua Davis with a 5-inch homemade knife.
Price then barges into Davis's cell and starts attacking him with what investigators say was a 4 to 5-inch metal homemade knife.
For this assault, Price received an additional 25-year sentence on January 18, 2019, pushing any chance of release even further into the future. While Craig's crime came from a deep root of hatred, the next child just terrorized people for fun. Nathaniel Abraham. Raising a son in Pontiac, Michigan during the economic struggles of the 1990s was never easy. For Nathaniel Abraham's single mother, survival meant hustling through hardship while trying to hold her family together. Without a father at home and with little guidance, Nathaniel drifted through childhood with almost no structure and even less support. By the time he was 11, police already knew his name. He skipped school, stole small items, and wandered the streets where gangs controlled the corners. Trouble followed him closely, and with every misstep, the line between childhood and crime grew thinner. On October 26, 1997, that line was crossed forever. Nathaniel carried a stolen .22 caliber bolt-action rifle taken from an old pier in his neighborhood, a place tied to gang activity. He climbed a hill about 200 yards from a convenience store and waited. That afternoon, Ronnie Green, just 18 years old, walked out of the store with a soda in hand. A recent high school graduate, he had no criminal record, no gang ties, and no reason to fear what was coming. As he headed toward his car, Nathaniel lifted the rifle, aimed from the hilltop, and pulled the trigger. The bullet struck Green in the right temple. He collapsed instantly, passing away before help could arrive. In seconds, the life of a young man filled with promise ended in silence on a parking lot floor. But this was not the first time Nathaniel had fired the weapon. Earlier that same day, he had tested the rifle at a playground, shooting at trees while children played only 50 feet away. Witnesses recalled the cracks of gunfire and remembered him laughing as he pulled the trigger. He missed the children, but the recklessness of the moment showed how little he understood the danger in his hands. After taking Green's life, Nathaniel returned to his neighborhood and bragged to his friends. He told them, "I got him good," with no sign of fear or remorse. To those listening, it sounded like a game. To investigators, it revealed a chilling lack of regard for human life from someone barely old enough to leave elementary school. The case sent shockwaves across the nation. How should the law deal with an 11-year-old charged with murder? Michigan's Juvenile Code of 1988 gave judges flexibility, but the crime sparked fierce debate in courtrooms, on television, and in living rooms across America. On December 10, 1997, prosecutors charged Nathaniel with first-degree murder.
When he was just 11 years old. Since then, he has been in and out of prison.
Yet 2 months later, Judge Eugene Moore moved the case to juvenile court after psychologists concluded that Nathaniel had only a limited grasp of consequences. The trial stretched on for 6 months. On November 16, 1999, Judge Moore convicted him of second-degree murder, ruling that evidence of premeditation was not strong enough. Nathaniel was sentenced to the Michigan Youth Facility in Howell, where he would stay until his 21st birthday. On January 18, 2007, he was released, legally an adult.
Well, Carolyn, Nathaniel Abraham is now 32 years old, and he had just been released from prison last summer.
But carrying a past that would never let go. Freedom proved no easier than confinement. Nathaniel struggled to find stability, weighed down by stigma and a lack of opportunity. 2 years later, he was back in handcuffs. On March 22, 2009, Pontiac police arrested him during an undercover sting. He had been selling ecstasy and was charged with 2 counts of delivery and 1 count of possession with intent to distribute. On July 15, 2009, the court sentenced him to 20 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. His second fall showed how hard it was for someone raised in institutions to adapt to the outside world. With no steady work, No real support and no lasting rehabilitation, he slipped back into crime. Now in 2025, Nathaniel Abraham is 39 years old and still in a Michigan prison. If Nathaniel's case sounds chilling, wait until you hear about a teenage girl who opened fire on children and when asked why, gave an answer that stunned the world. Brenda Ann Spencer. After her parents divorced, Brenda moved in with her father. Money was scarce, and the two shared a single mattress in the living room. In later interviews, Brenda revealed that she never felt loved by either parent and carried the weight of neglect. She accused her father of sexually abusing her, but when she told her mother, nothing was done.
Basically, they're the same as, I guess, everybody's. I'd like to have a normal life. You know, I came in really, really young, so.
Both parents denied her claims, leaving her feeling abandoned and unseen. She grew up restless and unhappy. As a teenager, she struggled in school and often clashed with authority. Brenda called herself a radical and often referred to police officers as pigs. She celebrated reports of officers being brutalized and admitted she wanted to do the same. Many classmates found her disturbing, and some described her as unstable. Despite her troubles, she showed a gift for photography, even winning a Humane Society competition. Still in class at Patrick Henry High School, teachers often had to check if she was awake or paying attention. Later, doctors discovered she had suffered a brain injury in a bicycle accident, an injury that may have shaped her erratic behavior. By 1978, her behavior was escalating. She was sent to a program for troubled students after skipping school too often, and staff there warned her parents that she was suicidal. That summer, she was caught shooting out the windows of Grover Cleveland Elementary with a BB gun and was also charged with burglary. Yet strangely, police reports about the school incident made no mention of the BB gun. In December, her probation officer arranged for her to see a psychiatrist. The doctor recommended she be placed in a mental hospital for depression, but her father refused. Instead, for Christmas, he gave her a Ruger .22 caliber rifle with a telescopic sight and 500 rounds of ammunition. Brenda had asked for a radio, not a gun. Later, when asked about the gift, she said chillingly, "He bought the rifle so I would kill myself." On the morning of Monday, January 29, 1979, 16-year-old Brenda Spencer stood inside her home and aimed that rifle at children waiting for the gates of Grover Cleveland Elementary to open. Principal Burton Ragg, 53 years old, was preparing to let the students inside. Brenda's first shot struck 9-year-old Cam Miller simply because he was wearing her favorite color, blue. By the time the shooting stopped, 8 children had been wounded. She then turned her sights on Principal Ragg, who was trying to help the children. She shot, taking his life.
I'm asking for the chance to prove to the board members and my victims that I have changed and that I am no longer a threat to society.
Then took the life of Mike Sucher, a 56-year-old custodian who was pulling a student to safety. Officer Robert Robb, one of the first policemen to arrive, was shot in the neck as he ran toward the school. The attack could have been far worse, but police quickly blocked her view by parking a garbage truck in front of the school entrance, stopping her from firing at more children. Brenda had fired 36 rounds before barricading herself inside her house. During the standoff, she answered a phone call from a local reporter who had randomly dialed homes in the area. To his shock, she admitted she was the shooter. When asked why, she replied coldly, "I don't like Mondays." This livens up the day. To police, she described her victims as easy targets and warned that she would come out shooting. After several tense hours, she surrendered. Reports say she finally gave up after negotiators promised her a Burger King meal. Brenda was charged as an adult and pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and assault with a deadly weapon. On April 4th, 1980, the day after her 18th birthday, she was sentenced to 25 years to life. 9 attempted murder charges were dropped. While in prison, she was diagnosed with epilepsy and depression and worked repairing electronic equipment at the California Institution for Women in Chino. She first became eligible for parole in 1993. At that hearing, she claimed she had wanted police to shoot her during the attack and insisted she had been using alcohol and drugs that day. But tests at the time of her arrest showed no drugs in her system, and the board did not believe her. 8 years later, she repeated the claim, but her credibility was questioned because she had never mentioned it before. In 2005, another parole bid was denied after she carved the words "unforgiven" and "alone" into her skin. 4 years later, the board refused her release again and ruled she would not be eligible for another hearing for a decade. As of 2022, Brenda admitted she was not ready for parole and agreed to wait until 2025 for her next chance. She remains behind bars at the California Institution for Women. Brenda's case shocked America, but the next teenager went even further. He didn't just take innocent lives, he smiled in court, taunting the grieving families. T.J. Lane. Now we turn to Chardon, Ohio, a quiet suburb where life seemed calm until tragedy struck in 2012. Thomas T.J. Lane was born in 1994 and grew up in a home shaped by his parents' divorce.
TJ's upbringing was turbulent. His parents were both arrested for domestic violence against each other in the first 2 years of TJ's life.
By the time he reached 17, he felt isolated, struggling with depression and a sense of alienation. At Chardon High School, he faced bullying that only deepened his despair. No one could have predicted that his struggles would escalate into one of the most shocking events the town had ever seen. On the morning of February 27, 2012, T.J. Lane, then 17, entered the crowded cafeteria at Chardon High School around 7:30 in the morning, carrying a stolen .22 caliber Ruger semi-automatic handgun. The room was alive with chatter and laughter as students ate breakfast before classes, completely unaware of the danger approaching.
But on that day, February 27, 2012, when he arrived at Chardon High School with a .22 caliber handgun, Lane found his way to the cafeteria.
Without warning, TJ raised the gun and opened fire. In just 20 seconds, he fired 10 rounds targeting students seated at tables. 3 students, 16-year-old Daniel Palmer, 17-year-old Russell King Jr., and 16-year-old Demetrius Hewlin, lost their lives instantly or succumbed shortly after to severe blood loss. Palmer was shot in the chest, King in the back, and Hewlin in the head and torso. 3 others, Nick Walzak, Joy Rickers, and Nate Muller, were injured but survived, suffering gunshot wounds to the arm, leg, and back. After the shooting, TJ fled the cafeteria and ran into a wooded area behind the school. He was spotted roughly 300 yards away while attempting to hide. Police arrived within minutes, tracking him with witness descriptions, and apprehended him in the woods less than 2 hours after the attack. During his 2013 court proceedings, TJ showed no remorse. He appeared in a plain white t-shirt with the word "killer."
That t-shirt is saying "killer," which was written on a sweater the day he did the shooting.
Handwritten in black marker across the front, and smirked at the victims' families and media. His behavior stunned the courtroom and made clear his lack of regret for the lives he had taken and the suffering he had caused.
TJ was charged as an adult. charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of aggravated attempted murder, and 1 count of felonious assault.
Ohio authorities determined that TJ should be tried as an adult due to the severity and public impact of the shooting under Ohio Revised Code, Section 2152.12, which allows such transfers for serious offenses. On March 19, 2012, a grand jury indicted TJ, then 17, on 3 counts of aggravated murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, and 1 count of felonious assault, covering both the deaths of Daniel Palmer, Russell King Jr., and Demetrius Hewlin.
And shot and killed 3 students. Demetrius Hewlin, 16, Daniel Parmenter, 16, and Russell King Jr., 17.
As well as the injuries to 3 others. On September 11, 2013, TJ pleaded guilty to all charges in Geauga County Common Pleas Court. Judge David Fury sentenced him on October 24, 2013 to 3 consecutive life sentences without parole, plus an additional 10 years for the firearm specification, ensuring he would remain in prison for life. The sentencing reflected Ohio's strict stance on mass violence and the seriousness of his crime. On April 2, 2014, TJ attempted to escape from the Allen Oakwood Correctional Institution in Lima, Ohio. He tried to tamper with a cell door lock and planned to flee through a ventilation shaft. Guards detected the attempt using surveillance cameras and subdued him by 9 that night, preventing any incident. This escape effort highlighted his defiance and refusal to accept his punishment, even after national debates over juvenile sentencing leniency in 2016. Following Supreme Court rulings like Miller v. Alabama, Ohio law upheld TJ's sentence. The state retained discretion to try offenders over 16 as adults, and no appeals succeeded. Today, TJ Lane is 30 years old and still behind bars in Ohio, but his story isn't the most horrifying on our list. Next, we meet a boy who seemed like the perfect neighbor, until a horrifying secret was found hidden right under his bed. Joshua Phillips. Known in his neighborhood as quiet and friendly, 14-year-old Joshua Phillips had a close friendship with a girl named Maddie Clifton who lived nearby. Maddie's mother, Sheila, never had any concerns about Joshua. He had no history of trouble and showed no signs of violent behavior. At school, Joshua was well liked by both classmates and teachers, often described as fun and silly, a typical boy for his age. On November 3, 1998, Joshua was home alone when 8-year-old Maddie came over asking him to play baseball.
Neighbors actually witnessed Maddie and Josh playing baseball together outside.
Despite knowing he wasn't allowed to have friends over without supervision, Joshua agreed. While playing in the yard, an accident occurred. Joshua accidentally hit Maddie in the eye with the ball. She began bleeding and screamed in pain, terrified and in shock. Panicked and fearful of his father's reaction, Joshua made a horrifying decision. In his fear, he dragged Maddie inside the house. He later claimed that during the struggle, her clothes were pulled off her lower body. Desperate to stop her from screaming, he struck her with a baseball bat, hoping it would quiet her. In a state of confusion and terror, he then hid her under his bed. When his father returned home, Joshua acted as if nothing had happened, interacting briefly before retreating to his room. Later, he realized Maddie was still alive, quietly moaning beneath the bed. In a final act of panic, he grabbed a knife from his Leatherman tool, removed the mattress, and ended her life by cutting her throat and stabbing her multiple times. That same evening, Maddie's family reported her missing around 5 o'clock, and the neighborhood began searching.
And now she's missing.
How old is she?
She's 8 years old.
Where was she playing at around the house?
Right around the house here.
Joshua even joined the search, blending in as if nothing had occurred. In the days that followed, he lived in denial. But a week later, on November 10th, his mother, Melissa, entered his room and noticed a wet spot on the floor. Alarmed, she investigated further and made a horrifying discovery. Maddie's body was hidden under Joshua's bed. She immediately called the police, and Joshua was arrested at school later that day. He confessed to the murder soon after. Prosecutors questioned aspects of Joshua's story. State Attorney Harry Shorstein suggested the crime might have had a sexual motive, noting Joshua had spoken about sexual matters with both Maddie and her older sister. Though the autopsy found no evidence of sexual assault, investigators pointed out inconsistencies. Maddie's body had no dirt or sand, contradicting Joshua's claim that her clothes came off while dragging her inside. And no blood was found in the yard or on the baseball, challenging his version of events. Joshua was tried as an adult for Maddie's murder. With no witnesses called by the defense, the jury deliberated just over 2 hours before finding him guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Joshua Phillips took the stand just hours ago as his attorneys try to get the judge to rule that he should not spend the rest of his life in prison,
as he was too young to receive the death penalty. As of 2025, Joshua Phillips remains incarcerated at the Cross City Correctional Institution. Joshua's crime was horrifying, but decades earlier, another teen committed a murder so savage it still haunts an entire town to this day. Walter H. Boore Jr. Our next story takes us to Berlin, New Hampshire in the 1950s, a quiet rural town where life moved slowly and neighbors trusted one another. Walter H. Boore Jr. grew up without direction. He dropped out of high school at 17, lived as a loner, and often behaved strangely. Locals noticed his odd behavior and whispered concerns, but no one stepped in to help or intervene. In this small community, his actions went unchecked. On the afternoon of July 12, 1955, 17-year-old Walter lured 4-year-old Donna Rainville, a neighbor's daughter, from her front yard into a wooded area about half a mile away. The exact words he used are unknown, but he may have promised candy or suggested they play. Once alone among the trees, Walter attacked Donna with a single-bladed axe he had hidden under his jacket. He struck her repeatedly, focusing on her head and torso, delivering at least 12 blows. The only sounds were the sickening thuds of the axe, echoing through the stillness of the forest. After the attack, Walter dug a shallow grave about 2 feet deep using a shovel he had stashed nearby. He buried Donna under leaves and soil in a desperate attempt to conceal the crime. Her body was discovered 3 days later on July 15th after frantic searches by residents and police who followed blood trails and disturbed earth. The brutality of the murder, multiple skull fractures and deep cuts, shocked the town. Residents could not comprehend such violence, especially from a teenager they had known. Police arrested Walter the next day, July 16, 1955, after he voluntarily confessed. He provided a detailed account of luring Donna to the woods and striking her with the axe. The Coast County Sheriff's Department processed him at the local jail, and the case was quickly moved to trial under New Hampshire's criminal statutes, which mandated severe penalties for murder. On February 20, 1956, a jury in Coast County Superior Court found Walter guilty of first-degree murder after a 2-week trial. The conviction relied on his confession, physical evidence including the axe and the shallow grave, and witness testimony. New Hampshire's strict laws and the public outrage over the crime shaped the outcome. On March 5, 1956, Judge Harold W. Perkins, expressing his horror at the violence committed against a child, sentenced Walter to 99 years and 6 months in the New Hampshire State Prison in Concord. The sentence was designed to ensure lifelong incarceration and to reflect the community's anger. Over the decades, Walter faced parole hearings in 1975, 1985, 1995, and 2005. Each was denied due to a lack of evidence of rehabilitation, including no participation in therapy or vocational programs, and ongoing reports of violent behavior in prison. New Hampshire law, combined with the crime's heinous nature, ensured that he remained behind bars with no appeals or challenges succeeding. As of 2025, Walter H. Boore Jr. is 87 years old and still incarcerated in New Hampshire. Frail but alive, he now holds the record as America's longest-serving prisoner for a crime committed as a teenager. After 70 years behind bars, the question remains, should Walter ever be released? The final story we will cover is even more shocking and heartbreaking. Raymond Childs III. Raymond Childs III grew up in a blended family with his father, stepmother, and siblings in Indianapolis, Indiana. His early behavior suggested small troubles, skipping school, minor theft, but nothing hinted at the violence to come. On the evening of January 24th, everything changed. Around 8 at night, a heated argument over a curfew escalated in the living room between Raymond and his 42-year-old father, Raymond Childs. In a sudden surge of rage, Raymond grabbed a 9mm semi-automatic handgun that he had hidden in his bedroom closet, fully loaded with 15 rounds. What followed was deliberate and terrifying. He fired 3 times into his father's chest and head, taking his life instantly. In the kitchen, he shot his stepmother, Xi, 42, twice in the back and once in the head. She, too, lost her life on the spot. Raymond's fury moved upstairs. His 13-year-old sister, Rita, sat on her bed when he shot her in the forehead, ending her life instantly. In the hallway, he confronted his 18-year-old brother, Elijah, and shot him 4 times in the chest and abdomen. The violence extended to Elijah's pregnant girlfriend, 19-year-old Kiara Hawkins, who was 6 months along.
The jury found he killed his parents, as well as his 13-year-old sister, 18-year-old brother, and his brother's 19-year-old pregnant girlfriend.
Raymond shot twice. 1 bullet struck her abdomen, the other her head, taking both her and the unborn child's lives. The house echoed with the sound of gunfire as he moved through each room. By 8:30 in the evening, he fled, discarding the handgun in a dumpster a few blocks away. A manhunt began immediately, and 3 days later, Raymond was discovered hiding in a friend's basement. The betrayal of murdering one's own family left the community and investigators struggling to comprehend the depth of his actions. Due to the extreme nature of the crimes, the courts chose to try Raymond as an adult under Indiana law, which permits such transfers for multiple homicides. On January 28, 2021, he was formally charged with 6 counts of murder, 1 for each victim, including the unborn child. After a waiver hearing, the case proceeded to adult court. On November 15, 2024, Raymond reached a plea deal, admitting guilt to all 6 counts. On March 10, 2025, he was sentenced to 360 years in the Indiana State Prison System, 60 years per count, to be served consecutively. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.